The screen. My name is. All righty. Good morning again. My name is Martin Brown. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer of the state of Virginia, and I just want to welcome everybody to the Outreach and Coordination Quarterly Subcommittee meeting for the Virginia Coastal Resilience Technical Advisory Committee. Want to thank our team at the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation for helping to coordinate this meeting. This is our quarterly meeting, and we've got a lot to cover. I want to mention on the front end that I'm actually going to have to step away at 11:15, and Daryl from DCR is actually going to be covering in my stead after that. As we move into our agenda, we've got a lot to cover, and hopefully we might even be finished by then. But so again, want to welcome everybody. I understand that there are members of the public who are part of our meeting today, as well as members of the subcommittee. And as we call to order, what I'd like to do is go ahead and take a roll call. So if we can get a call to order of all the individual members of the subcommittee, if you can take a moment to acknowledge your presence.
I can do the quick roll call.
Okay, if you would.
Keith Brown, I've got you. Daryl Glover, I've got you. And from the George Washington Regional Planning Commission, I believe Meredith Keppel.
Correct, I'm here.
And then we have Cameron Bruce from the Nansemond Indian Nation.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. From the Navy region, I have Joseph Howes. Is he on the call? Okay. Jill Bieri.
Yes, I'm here.
Reggie Tuppence.
I am here.
Good morning. Gregory Williams. I see you're muted, but I see you there. Bill Curtis.
I'm here, yes.
Bill Curtis. Okay, and then Caitlin Jordan.
Yes, from the Virginia Farm Bureau, yes.
Morning.
Good morning.
Brett Bassey, Virginia Manufacturing Association. And then Mary Carson Stiff or John Bateman from Wetlands Watch.
Good morning, Mary Carson Stiff, Wetlands Watch.
Good morning. Roll has been called.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let me just lay out for you what our agenda looks like for this today. Obviously, we've got the call to order, which we just did. Then we're going to adopt the agenda. If anybody has any questions about this particular agenda, please raise them. But we're going to, after we adopt the agenda, we're going to look at the meeting minutes from our Q3 meeting and adopt those minutes, and then have an overview of our subcommittee overview from Carolyn. We'll look at our old business. Carolyn will take a look at that, as well as outreach and engagement strategy, as well as end users stakeholder survey. And then if anybody would like to discuss any new business, this would be an opportunity for you to bring it up. We'll discuss new business, and then we'll also have time for the public to comment on any questions or any concerns or any thoughts that you might have. So members of the public, you will be welcome to speak at that time. We'll then wrap up with whatever our next action items for our next meeting, and then adjourn. Any questions about the meeting agenda, or anybody want to add anything or modify our meeting agenda? With that, all in favor of the meeting agenda, say aye.
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 Very good.
Aye.
All opposed? And so we're with that in mind, our meeting agendas have been adopted, and we're going to go ahead and move forward with our subcommittee overview, and also our adoption of the quarterly 3 meeting minutes. And we, Carolyn, we want to go ahead and jump into the subcommittee overview at this point.
We can go ahead and adopt those Q3 meeting minutes if folks can take a look. I did drop the meeting minutes from the last quarterly meeting in the chat in the draft form, so you should be able to access those in the Zoom chat, folks on the line.
Gotcha.
So is there a motion to adopt those minutes?
Yes. Can we get a motion to adopt the minutes from the?
So moved. Ooh,
Very
jinx.
All in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so quarterly 3 minutes have been adopted.
Wonderful.
Very
Thank you
good.
all. Okay. So I do just want to take a minute here at the top as part of the subcommittee overview to welcome, I think, just one invited guest that we have on the line today. I'm just checking to make sure we don't have another one. So Tanya Denkler-Cobb is joining us this morning. Tanya is the director of the Institute for Engagement and Negotiation at the University of Virginia and one of the leaders of the Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool and that effort. Tanya, do you want to unmute yourself and just say hello?
Yeah, hey, good morning, everyone. So glad to be here with you.
Thanks, Tanya.
Welcome,
We're glad
Tanya.
to have you. Thanks for being here. Wonderful. So we're going to move into general updates. So firstly, we do have the update that the Coastal Resilience Web Explorer user portal that we have mentioned at previous subcommittee meetings, as well as the previous TAC meeting, has now gone live. This user portal is really intended to allow a variety of stakeholders across the coastal region to submit information to be included in that Web Explorer about their ongoing projects, initiatives, and funding opportunities. We did conduct a bulk upload of projects and initiatives from localities and planning district commissions. I believe those were submitted at the end of September and have gotten a total of 143 submissions, which are almost entirely now included in the user portal and the Web Explorer. So if you go to take a look, you'll see a lot of those projects and initiatives have been updated. Thanks to all who supported us in that effort. And we'll talk more about this future updates of that user portal in the slides to come. Additionally, DCR has received and is reviewing responses to our request for proposals for resilience planning and consulting. So we're hoping to finish with those evaluations and select a contractor to have them come on board in early 2024, probably around March of that year. That's to support our ongoing work for this Coastal Resilience Master Plan Phase 2, particularly the components that Dewberry is not conducting, and then additionally our Flood Protection Master Plan, as well as other efforts of our team moving forward. Just to return to some of our subcommittee objectives that we discussed at our last meeting, refresher here, the goal of this subcommittee is to, oops, I'm sorry, lost my screen for a second, to inform and support outreach and engagement for this Coastal Resilience Master Plan Phase 2. So that specifically includes identifying and prioritizing which stakeholders we should be engaging, helping us to define our purpose, goals, and strategies consistent with our community outreach and engagement planning framework document. And then once we're in progress, to help guide the implementation of those strategies. We're also looking to the subcommittee to help strengthen relationships with key stakeholders. We've got some examples listed here, but it's certainly not limited to that. And we'll talk some more about key stakeholders today. And then lastly, each of the 4 TAC subcommittees is developing recommendations for future planning. You can see here a couple of the bullets related to this subcommittee's work in that area. At our last meeting in Q3, I presented the engagement strategy draft approach for this Coastal Resilience Master Plan Phase 2. Got some great feedback from you all at this meeting. We're going to provide an update of that strategy and get your feedback again on that. And then looking forward to 2024 and our remaining meetings until this plan is finalized in December of 2024, we're looking for your ongoing implementation feedback and support, as well as your development of future recommendations for future plans. Before I jump into old business and getting into the updated outreach and engagement strategy, as well as our end user stakeholder survey, are there any questions or comments regarding those general updates or the subcommittee's work? Okay, great. All right, so at our last meeting, I presented these three things: the kind of updated version of our community outreach and engagement plan. Again, this is a kind of a framework document that guides all of our resilience master planning outreach and engagement efforts. It was released as a draft in December 2022. We've been working on updates to that plan, which are currently undergoing internal revisions. No major updates or revisions to report out on that at this time. We have incorporated some feedback from the TAC into that document. The second thing I presented was the Coastal Resilience Master Plan Phase 1 outreach and engagement kind of methods and results. So shared a little bit of a refresher on what was done during the Phase 1 plan, who we reached, and then how that feedback was incorporated into the planning document. And then lastly, I presented our draft strategy for the Phase 2 plan for outreach and engagement. And that's what we'll be discussing and building on during these slides today. What we heard from the subcommittee during our last meeting regarding that outreach and engagement strategy was firstly that we should work on establishing clear goals for outreach and engagement, specifically strengthening and clarifying opportunities to influence decision-making, and then defining or answering the question whether it's a goal of the plan to encourage collective action that's acting in concert with the state. We also heard from you all that you'd like us to use gaps from Phase 1 engagement efforts in terms of which stakeholders were engaged to help inform who our priority stakeholders should be for this Phase 2 planning effort. And then lastly, we together kind of jointly identified some additional stakeholders to consider engaging in this effort. So since our last meeting, we've been busy working on updates to the strategy, and this is the summary of what we've accomplished. We have defined some plan end users, which I'll talk about on the next slide. We've established those goals and following up on your feedback. We've organized stakeholders into two major groups. And those have been prioritized based on a variety of factors, which we'll talk about. And then we've developed detailed engagement methods, and I'll go through each of those engagement activities and methods in the slides to come. We also outlined a more detailed public outreach campaign approach, the methods that we'll use for more of our informed strategies, and then define some measures for monitoring progress and how we can know that we're working towards our goals. So as we walk through the slides to come, and really I share those updates that I just covered on the last slide, what we're looking for from the subcommittee are some specific feedback, but of course we welcome the subcommittee's advice and guidance on all elements of this planning effort. Specific questions that we have for the subcommittee are whether you concur with implementing the strategy and whether there's any revisions that should be made. In terms of connecting with our audiences of interest, help identifying which localities we should really prioritize for engagement, and similarly, which underserved community organizations, so community-based organizations which represent underserved communities would be ideal to connect with, as well as those information sharing networks that can help us spread our messages. We also developed an end user survey based on feedback from this subcommittee, but also other subcommittees involved in this process, which we have shared as a draft format, and hopefully we'll have some time to talk through that. And then lastly, those metrics for monitoring progress, any feedback on whether those are the right metrics to use. So I'll bring back this slide later on. I wanted to share it at the top so that you all have information in mind of really what we're hoping to get out of this discussion before I dive into the details of the strategy. And again, we welcome the subcommittee's guidance on any elements of this approach. Okay, so updates to the strategy. As I mentioned, one of the primary things that we've done since our last meeting was really try to hone in on who are the plan's intended audiences. So we've got our primary audiences listed here on the left as planning district commissions, localities, state agencies or state agency programs, and tribal governments. Of course, we don't know exactly how they'll use this plan. We have some information from Phase 1, and we're hoping to gather some more information via Phase 2, but some ideas for how this plan might be useful to them are using models and findings as a starting point for additional assessment of asset and programmatic vulnerability. So we're going to be producing a lot of information about impact in our impact assessment about which assets in our communities are vulnerable to flooding. And so leveraging some of that information to conduct really more detailed assessment relevant to a given government entity or a given community. Incorporating flood hazard exposure models and impacts into other long-range plans, for example, leveraging some of the findings for community resilience plans or comprehensive plans, even regional hazard mitigation plans. Leveraging models and findings to aid in identifying and prioritizing resilience actions, and this includes potentially using some of the information to help develop grant applications. Identifying opportunities for collaboration with other actors toward resilience. So getting back to one of those questions for us to consider from the subcommittee's feedback from last meeting, we do think that there is an opportunity for this plan to help identify collaborative action. And lastly, to justify budgetary requests to really make the case for investing in resilience action.
Hey, Carolyn.
Yes.
Just a quick question. Just when we refer to localities, we're talking about local government, local businesses, and a local community, correct?
This is referring specifically to local governments, so municipalities, cities and counties primarily.
Very good. Okay.
Cities, counties, and towns, I should say. Wonderful. So, and yes, please do, if there are questions along the way, don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask your question or raise your hand or put it in the chat, whatever works. Okay, our goals. So another point of feedback we heard was define our goals. So in thinking about kind of the whole cycle and what elements of this plan we're producing out of our planning process, we identified the 4 goals that you see on the left-hand side of, or sorry, the right-hand side of the screen. Goals 1 through 3 are really focused on more engagement, so kind of collaborative feedback gathering and application, and goal 4 is really more of an outreach strategy. We'll talk more about that one on the next slide. So keeping in mind that we're producing this flood hazard exposure model, a flood hazard impact assessment, trying to quantify financial needs and provide some guidance around seeking funding for resilience, and then conducting this kind of planned resilience action analysis using the inputs from the user portal, as well as developing those TAC subcommittee recommendations. We thought about what feedback could be leveraged from these different end users and other stakeholders to apply to the plan. So our goals are to understand how the plan can be leveraged by intended end users, to contextualize the plan's content with qualitative data on flood impacts, to contextualize the plan's content with information on planned and ongoing interventions to address flood risk, and then lastly, our outreach strategy to drive awareness of and empower whole community action toward coastal flood resilience. Specifically for that last goal, goal 4 on outreach, we have some kind of sub-objectives within that to help explain that goal. So we intend to inform stakeholders here of, firstly, the existence of this plan and what it contains, the opportunities to participate in engagement activities to develop the plan, and then lastly, specifically for underserved communities, information which can help those underserved communities advocate on behalf of decisions to build flood resilience in their communities. And we talked about this spectrum for public participation that you see at the bottom here at our last meeting. Again, we're continuing to kind of use that as a guiding framework, that these kind of goals that you see on this slide are really related to that inform level or that outreach level, whereas we're thinking about some of our other activities through these consult, involve, and collaborative methods. In terms of stakeholder identification, so we took all of the wonderful work that we did with this subcommittee and internally at DCR to identify stakeholders and really map them on a spectrum and created these 2 major stakeholder groups. So our tier 1 stakeholder types are listed on the left. They include our plan end users, as well as other really involved entities in building flood resilience in the coastal region. And then on the right, our tier 2 stakeholders are interested parties who are not maybe directly involved in conducting resilience action, or who are not our targeted audiences for this particular plan in terms of end users who would take action based on it. So we can see on the left, we have those kind of stakeholders falling more into our involve and collaborate strategies for engagement, whereas our tier 2 stakeholder types would be more on the consult and inform level. So importantly, we do intend to provide opportunities for both outreach and engagement to all of these identified stakeholders, but are trying to prioritize based on our intended audiences and the purposes of this plan.
Hey, this is Caitlin Jordan. Can I jump in real quick?
Of course.
Will there be an opportunity to add like a potential name that would be a tier 2 stakeholder? I just wanted to provide another organization that would be interested, but I can do that offline or whatever is best.
That's great. I'm happy you can share that now. I should just say before you do, this is meant to be kind of a simplified list, just because naming all of the individual organizations it gets to be quite long.
Oh,
but certainly share that.
No, 100%. Yes, I just know last time we had listed it out, and I just did not list this name when we were brainstorming last time. The Virginia Agribusiness Council.
Okay. Business Council, perfect. We will capture that in a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yes, but just to kind of expand on that point, we do have a detailed kind of more comprehensive dashboard of stakeholders that goes into more detail than we have on this slide here. We're working on building that kind of on the back end, but it is quite long, so hard to share on a PowerPoint slide, but thank you, we will make sure they are added. Okay, we mentioned that one of the pieces of feedback we heard from you all is to prioritize stakeholders that were less involved during the phase 1 plan development. So what we've done since last meeting is take a look at, particularly for those tier 1 stakeholders from the last slide, which of those entities were really not as involved in the more collaborative engagement methods during phase 1. And this is the results of that kind of analysis. We looked at the organizations here on the left. So some localities, particularly those that are more rural with lower vulnerability to coastal flooding. So the phase 1 plan only looked at coastal flood risk. With phase 2, we'll be looking at rainfall driven and riverine flooding as well. So it'll be kind of a more comprehensive picture of flood risk that will probably be more applicable and interesting to some of these localities that are less likely to engage in coastal or identify as coastal. Some state agencies, boards, and commissions, a lot of these have been engaged in other methods already. Some of them are on the TAC, and we're looking at other methods to engage them in phase 2. Critical infrastructure owners, including utility providers, and then state and federally recognized tribes of Virginia's coastal region. We did have some state and federally recognized tribes participate during phase 1 and just are looking to build on that during phase 2. So this is a detailed picture of all of those methods that we are contemplating for, particularly for more of the engagement strategies. So you can see them all listed here. The slides that come will walk through each of these different activities in more detail. So I'm not going to talk about that here, but just to kind of show the spectrum of where we're planning these touch points with different stakeholders. Our detailed strategy contains information including the bullets that you see on the right here. And I'll really talk about the key points from that during the slides to come. So firstly, that Resilience User Portal and Data Call. So I mentioned previously that Web Explorer that we have developed and the user portal to go along with it. We have done already that kind of bulk upload and requested information on projects and initiatives once, but we would like to request another update of that prior to finalizing the plan. And this is really going to be used to help inform our picture of kind of our gaps, themes, and opportunities in the plan itself. So if we can see where we've got coastal flood hazard and impacts, and we can see where there are planned activities, we can probably also start to pull out what are some of the gaps that we're finding in coverage of those projects alongside where we know that the risk does exist. So here, this is speaking to goal number 3. If you look back to that previous slide with the list of goals, this is really working to identify resilience plans, projects, and funding opportunities that are underway in the coastal region. We're looking here at our tier 1 stakeholders that you see listed. And the format for this is a website. So the user portal is a website. It does require users to sign up for an account with DCR to gain access and kind of actively submit information in that way. We do recognize that some local governments may not have the capacity to participate in that way. So we're thinking about whether we can utilize our consultant support next year to help us help those organizations, those entities to submit information Of course, the consultants aren't able to generate the information, so there has to be something there to pull into the user portal in the first place, but some of that technical assistance might help to reduce some of the barriers to participation here. And our timeline for this is to set a deadline sometime in probably Q2 of next year. We haven't fully defined it yet, but are looking maybe at the April 2024 timeframe. Secondly, the Critical Infrastructure Working Group. So this activity is being led and organized by the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. This is really aiming at engaging kind of the whole spectrum of stakeholders that are engaged in critical infrastructure protection in the Commonwealth to help build an all hazards approach to thinking about critical infrastructure. And so VDEM's taking the lead. We're hoping to leverage some of what comes out of that working group to help us inform how critical infrastructure is included in this plan and how we're thinking about flood impact to critical infrastructure. This will be meetings, probably in a mix of in-person and virtual. We're still waiting on a timeline from VDEM for this, but they're hoping to get that charter for this working group finalized, I think by the end of the year, to get things kicked off next year. Our next strategies, there's two sets of engagement meetings which are distinct in that kind of overview. Both have similar goals, which are really all four of the goals that we established for outreach and engagement. Really thinking about this as a two-way knowledge sharing opportunity with tribal governments and with localities. So both of these are tier 1 stakeholders, and we're thinking of a format of in-person meetings, and where possible, combining meetings between tribal governments who would like to meet together if those exist, and then again on the locality side, maybe combining within a planning district commission just due to resource constraints on DCR's side. The timeline for both of these would be between March and April of next year. Until then, we do need to start working on identifying which localities in particular we're going to prioritize. Obviously, there are quite a lot of localities in the coastal region, and so we're interested in thinking through which ones are most critical to engage in this phase 2 planning effort, who are maybe not going to engage through other methods. For tribal governments, similarly, we need to begin outreach with these groups, and I know we have 2 representatives from tribal governments on the call today. We'd love your feedback on this strategy and how we can make it most successful. So to the point of thinking about which localities we should be contacting for meetings, we're considering, what factors should we consider for prioritizing those meetings, keeping in mind that we can host about 3 meetings within 3 different PDCs, and then creating kind of a preliminary list that we can discuss with this group today. So the factors we considered were flood risk, again, all forms, so coastal, rainfall driven, and riverine. Social vulnerability, so how it scores on different social vulnerability indices or different measures of social vulnerability. Prior engagement and capacity, so how they have engaged in either kind of the phase 1 planning effort and or other efforts, some of which you can see listed here as bullets. And then of course, interest and availability. We recognize that not all local governments are necessarily going to want to meet with us about this and are going to have the availability to do so. So thinking about that as a starting point, we did pull some of these factors that you see here listed as the sub-bullets. So using the FEMA's, this is the National Risk Index for combined flood risk. Use that as well as the low-income definition from the Community Flood Preparedness Fund and the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index score, as well as whether or not they had participated in the raft in the past 3 years and whether or not they had a DCR approved local resilience plan. We came up with this list on the right here that you see. So looking at ANPDC, Accomack and Northampton counties, and HRPDC, perhaps City of Franklin and Newport News, and then Northern Neck PDC, perhaps Lancaster County, and maybe additional counties at the recommendation of the PDC. So we would certainly love feedback on whether these are the right localities, what factors we should use, if we should even be thinking about this in kind of such a quantitative way, or if there's other ways that we can get to identifying priorities. And we can discuss that. We'll have time for a discussion later on. If there's any urgent thoughts on this, please don't hesitate to unmute and speak up. Okay, we'll come back to this. Okay, so the end user survey. This is one of our consult methods. This survey is intended to help us, DCR and the TAC, understand how this plan can be leveraged by our intended end users. And so the survey will speak to both how have you used the phase 1 plan, as well as questions about funding and financing of resilience activities. Our audience here is really our tier 1 stakeholders, and primarily our plan end users that we talked about previously. And this would be an electronic survey. We have it currently in Microsoft Forms that would be distributed via email, but probably would need some additional follow-up to kind of try to get as much response as we can via phone or more targeted emails to our key stakeholders. We're hoping to get this out in the next few weeks and have responses due by the end of this calendar year, by the end of December. I did, as I mentioned, there is a copy of that draft survey in the handouts package that was distributed via email, and which should also be available to you in the chat. So we will have time to discuss this during the discussion as well. Our underserved community meetings, this is really targeting goals 2 and 4. So providing information which we are sharing at the midpoint public meeting, and also providing and collecting feedback via the participatory mapping tool in terms of our engagement strategies. But then on the inform side with goal number 4, our outreach strategies, again, if you remember back to that previous slide, one of our goals is to provide underserved communities with the information that they need to help advocate on decisions that can help benefit resilience in their communities. So really trying to carry out that particular goal. Here, we are thinking about opportunities, particularly where a community is a neighborhood-based community. We recognize that not all communities in the state are organized around neighborhoods, but we imagine maybe some of the communities we identify would be neighborhood-based. There, it might be appropriate to bring together not just the community with the state, but also invite the local government to participate in those meetings as well and share information about their work, or just listen to the discussion that's ongoing. We'd like to share information in these meetings about the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund, and also local resilience plans that are more relevant to the work of floodplain management. So we're working with them to identify their support and engagement in this process as well. So again, the audience here is our tier 2 stakeholders. We're particularly looking at working through established community-based organizations who are representing or serving underserved communities with an interest in flood resilience. We recognize that there's a lot of different communities across the coastal region, and that it is not easy to get in touch with underserved communities when you're coming from the state level, particularly keeping in mind that many of these underserved communities are being asked to participate in a variety of different planning efforts from the local government up. So we're really looking to connect with these groups through these community-based organizations as kind of a conduit to help us reach folks that are already interested or already kind of meeting together and thinking about these topics to have the most impact towards our goals. And here we're thinking of up to 7 in-person meetings between June and July of next year, so mid-year next year. And we recognize that there's also going to be a lot of work that will need to happen before those meetings happen to help build contact and also establish goals for these meetings, not just our goals as DCR, but things that those communities might want to hear about from us. And on the right-hand side of the screen here, you can see our definition of underserved communities. This is from the Community Flood Preparedness Fund manual, and we're intending to keep a consistent definition for consistency across DCR's programming. So here, a couple of things that we're working through right now: identifying underserved communities at risk of flooding. So what sort of spatial demographic data and flood risk data can we use to understand that? Again, recognizing that not all underserved communities are going to organize or identify around their area of residence or their neighborhood, but there are likely other forms of communities that we should be thinking about. And then identifying community-based organizations that serve those underserved communities who have an interest in flood resilience. So kind of our next steps there, we've started contacting other government agencies and programs, as well as non-governmental organizations serving these geographic areas for their experience and guidance. And then we're really starting to think about how we can offer presentations to some of these established networks to help connect with those community-based organizations and start sharing information. Just to, I guess, emphasize the point that here we're not trying to stand up our own meetings. We're really trying to leverage existing meetings that are already happening. We recognize that everybody is kind of strapped for time and things are busy and there's a lot of meetings being requested. And so looking at opportunities to partner with others, and hopefully some of working with established organizations can help us to accomplish that and kind of reach folks where they're already meeting in their communities, if possible. Okay, Web Explorer participatory mapping and feedback tool. So here, this is another consult strategy. This is geared toward our tier 2 stakeholders and really the general public. So our goal is to collect information about the impacts of flooding and assets at risk. And this would be some sort of spatial survey tool that we could put online in our Web Explorer, possibly a new tool, to complement the existing information on flood hazards that we're already producing and already including online. This would help us visualize assets, challenges, maybe also assets in the coastal region. We could potentially draw from some of the existing mappers like this that already exist. On the right-hand side here, you can see the screenshot of the Old Dominion University's Institute for Coastal Adaptation and Resilience. They have developed a Southside Community Engagement ArcGIS online tool, which could potentially be leveraged and scaled up. Or there's other similar mapping tools that have been developed by others. I know last time we talked about how Wetlands Watch has worked on a tool, which could also potentially be leveraged. So we want to make sure that we're not overly duplicating efforts that already exist or maybe drawing from them, and hoping to launch this by mid-year next year to collect that information and consolidate it, kind of share this information across the coastal region. Public comment, we are planning to have a public comment period for the plan. This is a consult strategy. We're putting together feedback on the success of the contents of the plan from the general public and all of our stakeholders. So we would provide via town hall, web-based access to the full text of the draft plan with options to submit public comment. Our timeline for this would be December of 2024. In terms of our inform or outreach strategies, one method that we've identified on an ongoing basis is our monthly NGO meetings. And so our goal here today is to drive awareness of flood resilience planning through working with the NGO community to support information sharing to the public. Where this is primarily tier 1 stakeholders, so organizations that are already working on building flood resilience in Virginia's communities. And this is a virtual 1-hour monthly meeting. We actually have one today later on, and there's a sign up form for this on our website so that people can opt into receiving the invites on an ongoing basis. Public meetings, another informed strategy. So our goal here is to, again, drive awareness of flood resilience planning activities and opportunities to provide input in the process, targeting the general public. We are thinking of having a couple of sets of virtual webinar meetings via WebEx or similar format that would be recorded and posted online to both YouTube and DCR's website for viewing at different times. Thinking having one before the plan is finalized and then one once the plan is finalized, and sharing information about what's been conducted during the planning process to date, what DCR is, what some of our findings are, what remaining activities are in the process, and how you can provide public comment or engage in the participatory mapper or other ways that we're collecting feedback from folks on this plan. In terms of that public outreach campaign, we recognize for all of these things, for example, for public comment or for those public meetings, we're going to have to get the word out that it's happening and people should come and listen in. So we've identified a variety of methods to use for these different larger informed strategies, including our quarterly newsletter, using social media posts, emails to key information sharing networks and presentations, distributing materials at DCR events and to our partners who may be meeting with the public or meeting with other stakeholders in these formats, and then our webpage and a press release, particularly for when the plan is finalized. And so the purpose here is to really advertise our scheduled public participation opportunities and build awareness of our plan on an ongoing basis. A couple of those methods mentioned information sharing networks. This list has been updated based on some of the feedback you all gave us at our last meeting, but really some of our touch points with some of these organizations that are already active in this space and sharing information that can provide another format for getting the word out beyond DCR's direct reach. We do have some potential gaps in thinking about maybe there are some other networks we can reach, particularly to contact underserved communities or organizations serving underserved communities. So houses of worship, social services providers, the private sector as well, and state councils and working groups. If the TAC subcommittee has any recommendations for other networks that should be included on this list, they would be very welcome either during this call or later on once you've had a chance to look through this list in more detail. So our schedule. So I had information on the schedule on each of those slides, but just to kind of show it all in one place, this is how we're looking at the kind of the next 12 months, year of implementation, really finalizing our engagement strategy, hopefully by the end of this month, and then finalizing some of that public outreach campaign, the materials behind that by the end of this year. And then you can see the different activities, the end user survey, the tribal and locality meetings, the user portal uploads, et cetera, listed out here over the timeline of the remainder of the plan. There's a lot of dependencies here that we've been working on mapping out in terms of how when feedback is being gathered and when that can influence the development of the plan. We're planning to also document all of the feedback we received and make that available. Similarly to in phase 1, we did provide as appendices of the plan itself information about who we engaged and some of the findings of that in more of a raw format, so that is accessible and useful later on as well. These are my final slides. Thinking about monitoring progress. So how do we know if we're being successful towards our stated goals? These are goals and expected outcomes are from the Community Outreach and Engagement Plan framework. You can see here, firstly, we want to collaborate across existing planning efforts and other existing outreach and engagement efforts. And so we're thinking about how we can quantify how much of that is occurring through this planning effort. So the percent of some of the other government stakeholders engaged during the plan. Our second goal is to seek out the participation of affected and vulnerable stakeholders. And so we're thinking about how can we quantify and track the number of underserved communities that are represented via these public participation methods. And then goal 4, provide access to information and opportunity for participation. Here we're thinking about tracking things like number of stakeholder comments received or instances of feedback received, numbers of individuals that we're reaching by information sharing methods, how many, if we're offering kind of post-meeting feedback surveys, are we getting good feedback in response to those surveys? And what % of the elements for stakeholder feedback are considered prior to plan completion? And then this is a list of what those elements would look like. So to wrap up here, I've got, bringing back that slide from the top, requests for subcommittee feedback. These are specific questions for you all. Again, on a whole, do you agree with implementing the strategy? Do you see any revisions that could be made? And then thinking about connecting with our intended audiences, feedback on that stakeholder survey, and whether those metrics for monitoring progress are the right metrics, or if there's anything else you think we should be tracking. So this is a lot. That's all I've got for, I'm now going to open it up to subcommittee discussion. I'm just going to leave this slide up so we can reference back to it as needed. So Cersei, I see you've got a comment in the chat, and everybody, Cersei was our second invited guest. She was able to join us a little bit later. Cersei, do you want to just come off mute and say hello to everybody, introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, good morning. Apologies for the delay. Cersei Gonzalez from Chesapeake Bay National Estuary and Research Reserve in Virginia, here as community liaison.
Thank you. So your question, apologies if I missed it, but is there any reason why Middle Peninsula PDC wasn't on target locality list? Yeah, so that list of target localities was intended, we need to kind of narrow it down. We can't meet with all of the localities. And so we're thinking about how to prioritize which localities we should be meeting with. And this was the list we came up with from looking at the factors on the left. But certainly what we're interested in is, does the subcommittee agree with these factors? And kind of regardless of the factors, does the subcommittee agree with the list? So if you think Middle Peninsula PDC should be on the list of target, we can certainly consider that and talk through that.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the official subcommittee members, but I am engaged in quite a few flood resilience efforts in the area. I know it was a big part of the raft discussions that took place, and I have a couple of workshops coming up on topics. So I feel like there's potential for a continued conversation in this vein, but I leave it to others to chime in too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hey, Cersei, I think I might piggyback on what you're saying. This is Tanya Denkla-Cobb. And yeah, I was curious also about the Middle Peninsula. And I'm also, it's kind of interesting that one of the criteria for who to contact is that there's been no participation in the raft. And so, but I'm not sure that should be a criterion for not engaging them, because I feel like in some ways participating in the raft has really geared them up to understand and to want to participate and to have ideas that they might not have had before. So I'm kind of, I mean, my gut says that's that we shouldn't do that, and for the reasons stated. And I also was curious about why Middle Peninsula wasn't in there, and also curious about why out of Northern Neck, because Lancaster was engaged in the raft, but why it was called out in the Northern Neck as opposed to any of the other counties in the Northern Neck that also, might be interested. And then another thought is, I am so aware of you're having to pick and choose and having to figure out, okay, we don't have unlimited resources. How do we use them wisely and efficiently? And yet there are, I'm seeing a couple of cities with HRPDC, but there are some towns I'm thinking that also might need to be involved, that like Colonial Beach, for example, just to name one, or Cape Charles on the Eastern Shore, that are part of the counties, but also have significant separate governments and issues. So there's that. And then I also wanted to call out that for on the Eastern Shore, that there is a really significant 5-year project that is funded by the NSF Coasts and People called COPE. There's a lot of NSF COPE projects sort of roaming around. And there's one on the Eastern Shore that's pretty significant, being led by the Environmental Institute at UVA, with a very broad research team and with a very active community advisory committee led by the director of the YMCA, and also a local faith leader. So there's a lot of activity around that. And I feel like, there is a risk of, I mean, we all know about engagement fatigue, right? We know that people also have difficulties when multiple groups are sort of parachuting in, And so I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to partner with, for example, to partner with the NSF Cope project. We're going to be having a workshop on the Eastern Shore, February, I think it's 7th, I'm not sure, but it's early in February. And is there a possibility of either piggybacking on that or partnering, you know, where maybe we can have you come and talk with the team? I'm just worried about, I want to make sure that there's not duplication of effort, and that whatever
Absolutely.
we have learned through this, which is their priorities and their issues, and how, and what's, you know, Barbara Brown Wilson and her group is developing an equity atlas for decision-making, based on this long-term engagement. So I'm thinking, let's try to make sure that your engagement doesn't duplicate efforts and is at least building on it, and is aware of what's happening.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, that's really helpful. I'm hearing, you know, in the chat from Mary Carson, as well as from you, don't necessarily exclude localities who are already starting to think about this because they've received support, and also, you know, think about how we can work together, particularly for reaching localities and planning district commissions through some of these existing projects. So certainly we will take that feedback and think about how to incorporate it. Are there any other recommendations or questions about the plan as a whole, or about connecting with audiences of interest?
Hey, Carolyn, it's Caitlin Jordan. I have a few questions in general, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Hopping back to the Coastal Resilience Web Explorer, I just had a few thoughts when I was looking at these slides the other day. I looked at it online, and I know that this is a very new development and it's wonderful. So I was looking at the VA funding for projects, and it looks like it was last updated in September of 2021. Is there currently a plan in place to update it? Whose role is it the responsibility of the locality to update it, or who does that fall on? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so that is definitely, I think, more of a challenge than the projects and initiatives there. That's really right now falling on DCR staff, and we have limited capacity to go do a comprehensive update, especially considering the volume of new funding opportunities that exist. We actually just spoke with the Coastal Zone Management team out of DEQ last week about opportunities to work together with them. They're also doing a lot of work to track funding opportunities, and so trying to figure out how to coordinate efforts there. And then are opening it up to our kind of community of nonprofit organizations who are active in this space. I know Wetlands Watch has developed their own really excellent funding tracker tool that exists. We don't want to duplicate that effort. So it's a little bit fluid. It's a little bit of a challenge. We are looking at opportunities to keep it more updated in coordination with CZM, but still working through what that looks like. I think we do have a much greater opportunity once we have our consultants on board to have them take point on updating that. I think it'll be less of a challenge starting hopefully March 2024.
Okay, that's great. And another thing I was thinking about with it, if you're trying to use it as kind of like a central hub for like information and everything, and just being a centralized location, I was thinking too, if it has the capacity to send out alerts for the users that are signed into it, you know, for flooding or upcoming hazards or funding opportunities or things like that. You could use that as another way to engage stakeholders or end users, audience members, things like that.
Yeah, that's great feedback. It doesn't currently have that capability, but we can think about that for future updates.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. I see there's some comments in the chat. Jill, do you want to come off mute and share your comment?
Sure. I mean, you know, I recognize what Tanya was talking about on the Eastern Shore. She mentioned some specific projects, and I think that would be the case for any of the regions. There are ongoing efforts, and so I think that should be a consideration maybe in who we're reaching out to. Like in some areas, we could just piggyback on existing projects and community events that are already being proposed with the same topic in mind. In other areas, there might not be as much local support. There might not be, so I think that needs to be a criteria in thinking who we're going to focus in on with this effort.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I wonder if I could ask the subcommittee members to think about what those ongoing efforts are. Of course, we know and try to keep a pulse on things that are happening, but you all also have really good touch points with these efforts, or are doing the efforts yourself, and can share some of those opportunities. So if you could help us by sending us, maybe after this email, via email, a list of your top recommendations for processes to try to partner with to avoid this duplication of effort, that would be extremely helpful. And we'll of course capture all that was mentioned today via the minutes as well. I see MC, you said welcome coordination on the funding tracker. Yeah, continuously updated. Yes, we have on our to-do list to get in touch with you about that. And then to Tanya's point, I think conducting this outreach in advance and kind of building this network, absolutely. And we know that this process is not the end of network building as well. I think we're thinking of this as a continuation of phase 1, but also building this network to continue our 5-year planning cycle, and also to build our stakeholder network for our other plans, including the statewide plan.
Carolyn, can I just jump in here real quick?
Of course.
I just wanted to say, in terms of identifying priority localities, from my understanding on your slide and what you had said, it's based off of models that we currently have. And so I just wanted to maybe throw out there, and I don't know if this changes anything, but the models that are coming, including the pluvial flooding model, might significantly change what communities are at risk. Because right now we're looking mostly at the flooding that's tidal. And so for my localities, it's not going to be, most of them at least, it's not going to be as much tidal flooding that they're concerned with. And pluvial flooding, I think, is something that is a big concern in our area, and something that I've seen other pluvial flooding models look at, has identified our region as a priority area. So I think just knowing that the timeline of all of this is not probably going to allow for you to identify priority localities based on the pluvial flooding model, I did just want to put that in there, that maybe there's a footnote in the document that says, these priority localities are based off of X, Y, and Z criteria.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful, and an excellent point. Like I mentioned earlier in the slides, we didn't have great participation from localities that viewed themselves as non-coastal during phase 1, and I makes sense if that's not what we're modeling. And you're right that the timeline doesn't allow for us to use our own model for the identification. But I think if we step away from the very quantitative indices, we can also rely on folks like yourself, Meredith, planning district commissions and others to help us say, hey, we know that there are challenges with flooding that aren't captured in the coastal flood model, but in these communities, these localities, that we should consider. Certainly we're open to that, and it not necessarily being such a numbers driven identification process as well.
Carolyn, can I jump in here with a question real quick?
Of course.
So I know that you had mentioned that when consulting with the different tribes in Virginia, there would be around 3 kind of group meetings to discuss issues with them. One of the questions or I guess concerns I have about doing group meetings is that even among the federally recognized tribes of Virginia, they're all in vastly different places when it comes to resilience planning. Some of them are just getting started with doing baseline vulnerability assessments, whereas others have kind of developed their own climate adaptation plans and are working to be integrated into more regional ones. So depending on which tribes you have at the table for those meetings, the conversation could go very differently, just depending on where they are. So I didn't know if there was kind of a thought process in place for how exactly to group tribes together to make sure that they're all being able to provide their own unique input depending on their situations.
That's a great point, Cameron. I think we're still trying to figure that out, and we're hoping to get guidance from yourself and perhaps Reggie about how to think about that. I think it's helpful to know that maybe grouping by level of kind of advancement or stage in the process of thinking about resilience might be potentially a way to do it, and maybe group in that way, or we were considering geographic proximity or just tribes that tend to work together on a regular basis for other things, but certainly we're looking for help defining that.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'm happy to have that conversation offline,
Okay.
including Reggie as well.
Great.
Hey, this is Reggie. I would think for an initial meeting, probably all the tribes that are interested or that are working on the issue. We've done quite a bit of work over the last couple years. Lee Mitchell, who's our environmental director, has. And I would just think from a standpoint of if we were at a starting point, it might be good to hear what the other tribes have had successes with and failures with, and go from there. And then if you need to split out, in smaller working groups that are more, in the same area or same time frame of work, then do it that way. But the initial meeting, I think a joint meeting would probably be best.
Thank you for that feedback. And do you think there are any existing meetings that could be leveraged for that purpose, or would this be best as a standalone, separate DCR hosted meeting?
I would.
Go ahead, Reggie.
I would kind of, push it out to Lee on it. I know that
Okay.
the tribes meet with the EPA RTOC monthly, and that has been a forum to discuss a lot of different issues, environmental and some outside of the environmental space. And most, if not all, of at least the federally recognized tribes are represented on there. That wouldn't include the state recognized tribes, but that's one area that I can think of off the top of my head.
Great, thank you. Cameron?
That's exactly what I was going to suggest was the monthly RTOC meeting with EPA, but like Reggie said, it doesn't include the state recognized tribes.
Okay, thank you. I saw a comment in the chat from Tanya regarding participatory mapping and the challenges with that approach to reaching or gathering feedback from vulnerable communities. Yes, I agree. I think here we are hoping to, through those underserved community meetings with community-based organizations, invite them to participate in that process in an in-person kind of physical format, and then transfer that to the online mapper using our consultant support. But I agree that even that is not going to effectively capture all of the issues. And so if there are any recommendations for how to continue thinking about other formats for collecting feedback from the general public, but specifically within the general public audience, those communities that are underserved, how we might be able to do that is any feedback there is welcome.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty massive issue. It's not to be underestimated in its challenges. And I think that is where piggybacking on existing efforts is going to be really important, because some of these people literally just don't even have the time or even the connectivity necessarily to do what's being asked of them. So if you can find a way to go to meetings that they're already involved in, and it's a conversation we can have offline, Carolyn, but it's complicated, and we can share what we've learned. It's not, I don't think asking people to do things is going to work. Bottom line, I don't think it will happen. I don't think people will have time. A different approach is needed.
Yeah, and I think we're also thinking about the appropriate level of effort to put into that type of engagement of the average Virginia or average underserved Virginian, the individual resident, versus really focusing on our tier 1 stakeholders, the more desired end users of this plan, not because it's not important to do outreach to those individuals, but because that is often more appropriate for a locality or for another organization to be doing, just because of the amount of effort and also the level of planning that's happening at these different levels of government. So I think we're also thinking about how can we support others to effectively do this engagement in their own planning efforts that is going to be more relevant to the issues and some of the things that are happening in those communities, but also still thinking about, again, our goal of empowering these communities to advocate on behalf of their needs to their local governments and to others by leveraging some of the information from the state. So trying to balance those two things, agreeing that it's incredibly important, incredibly time consuming. There's a lot of folks already doing this work. And so trying not to duplicate efforts and finding where we as a state best fit into that picture.
Yeah, just saying that it is sometimes smaller localities that just don't have the resources. So anyway, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about that. It is tier 1 it's not just tier 2 that has this issue. Just trying to flag that.
Yeah, great point. If there's no other comments on the strategy in general, and we can also come back to it if there are, I was hoping maybe we could just change topics a little bit and talk about the end user survey. So I am going to see if I can pull it up here on my screen. And this is also in your handout package at the end after the slides. This survey, oops, zoom in a little bit. So getting to Tanya's comment again, we are asking people to respond to the survey. We tried to keep it fairly brief. We recognize that not everybody is gonna complete it, but we think even getting some responses from localities and their consultants will help us in thinking through the phase 2 plan. So specifically, we're trying to understand how people have used the phase 1 plans and then kind of using that to inform what products could be most useful to include in phase 2 as a whole, but also specifically for funding and financing. So there's 20 questions, and we think this survey will take 15 minutes. Several of the questions are related to information, just name, title, email address. We do want this to be kind of folks' professional responses, and we want this to be, it's intended for practitioners and not for the general public. So this is something we want to be able to follow up on. So we are asking for that information. And then information about who they're responding on behalf of, and then we get into the questions. So I don't know that I want to go through all of these in detail. I hope you all are able to pull it up on your own computer and take a look. If you have any feedback either on the questions themselves or how we're going to be distributing it, which I can talk a little bit more about, we would absolutely welcome those comments. So just to say quickly in terms of distribution, our plan here is to kind of simultaneously with building our email list of locality resilience points of contacts, distribute this via email out to each of the local governments and planning district commissions, and put out a specific request to planning district commissions to help us distribute it to their localities as well. We're also planning to distribute it to all of our tribal points of contact in the coastal region via email, and encourage folks to take a look and respond online. We are thinking about following up via specific emails or phone calls, trying to track our kind of, if we're getting responses from these different end users, and then send a follow-up email if we haven't gotten a response to encourage people to answer. If we have the resources, which is still very much an if, we would like to be able to do a follow-ups via phone call and maybe get some answers to the questions here in that format for those who are unable to take the time to go through and work through it on their own. So again, we recognize we're not going to get responses from everybody. There are challenges with capacity, but we would still really love some of this information and would love your feedback on the approach. Caitlin, I see you have some recommendations that we will capture. Thank you for those. If there aren't any other specific comments at this time, again, I'd very much welcome the TAC to send your feedback via email. Maybe take a look when you have a chance to read through the questions. Imagine yourself responding to it. Do you think you could answer the questions? That type of thing would be really helpful for us as we're preparing to send this out. Oops. Cersei, thank you for your comment on the DEQ roundtables and your offer to support with York River. Thank you, that's wonderful. Are there any other comments, questions, recommendations on any of these bullets? Okay. Well, hearing none, our last agenda item before public comment is new business, subcommittee discussion. Are there any other topics that the subcommittee would like to discuss? Okay, hearing none. Public comment? Do we have any, if you are a member of the public who would like to provide a comment, please, you can let us know in the chat or unmute yourself. You have a maximum of 5 minutes to provide comment at this time. Wheeler, there wasn't anybody who let you know they were interested, right?
No one put anything in the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, seeing and hearing nothing there. To move on to action items. Pretty quick meeting. So action items, I heard a lot of wonderful feedback from you all regarding the strategy. Thank you so much. We're going to capture all of that in the meeting minutes. Action items for you all, if you could please think about what ongoing efforts you know are doing stakeholder engagement in the coastal region related to flood resilience that we could potentially partner with, and send us any suggestions for that. Information on specific meetings or formats that are coming up would be extremely helpful. We know that you all are doing really wonderful work in this space and would like to, again, as we've discussed, leverage all of that. So please do share that information with us. If you have any additional feedback on the end user survey or any other stakeholders that are really important to engage, please also send that our way. You can email me and Chief Brown to share that information. And then on my end, there were a couple of follow-up conversations to be had, connecting with Tanya, connecting with Reggie and Cameron regarding the tribal meetings. I think those were the main ones, and connecting with Wetlands Watch regarding their funding opportunities and other topics. For our next meeting, the next full TAC meeting, so that all the subcommittees together, the full TAC is meeting on December 15th. It is an all virtual meeting. You should have received the meeting invitation. It is also on DCR's calendar. Similarly to this one, you do need to sign up with the Zoom link to get the Zoom link to join. So please remember to do that. For our next meeting, we will work on scheduling a time. We heard from the survey results on the meeting recurrence that there is a preference for Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday mornings. So we will work on finding a time that works within that time frame, hopefully. in 2024, quarter 1. So be on the lookout for that meeting invite. We will talk about the kind of ongoing efforts for outreach and engagement, your feedback and any questions or support that we have needs for there, and then recommendations for future planning efforts. If you have anything else that you would like to bring up for discussion, please feel free to email me and Chief Brown in advance of the meeting, and we can be sure to include those on the agenda.
Carolyn, one more quick thing. Do you know who the contact is for the VDEM Critical Infrastructure Working Group?
Yes, I do, Caitlin. I can send you, her name is Amber Laughlin. I can send you her contact information and more information on that group as a follow-up.
That would be great. I would love that. Thank you so much. Sorry to put more on you.
No, that's fine. Sounds good. All right. And that is everything I have. Let's see. I struggle to stop sharing because my Zoom is messed up. Chief Brown, are you still with us?
I am. Yeah, I
Wonderful.
was about to wrap up. Really appreciate your leadership today and getting us through the meeting, Carolyn, and really appreciate everyone's input. I think it was a very successful meeting. Thank you. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next quarter.
Very good.
Thank you.